Okie dokie. So, I think everybody's been to a meeting before. Do you want to do introductions anyway? Sure. Go ahead.
I'm Heidi Dukirk, one of the county commissioners. Lauren Webb, Moving Matters Project.
JT, Cook County.
Bruce Martinson, Alester County Commissioner.
Bobby Deshaw, Grand Portage Construction.
I'm Kristen Wharton of the Statute County.
I'm Mike Keyboard, Grand Portage Emergency Management.
Paula Schaebauer, Grand Portage Health Services.
Jan Stevenson, City of Grand Marais.
Brian Anderson with MnDOT. Tim Kennedy, Grand Marais.
All right. And Patrick.
Sound guy.
Hey.
Hey, Patrick.
All right. So, we handed out a document for everybody. It's just getting started. That basically summarizes the process that we've been undergoing. It has starts with a background as to how we got to this point. And then there's a description of the entire planning process, meeting by meeting. And I see already I made a mistake on page 5. That should be meeting 5 on April 10th. Or meeting 5, March something, 10th or something like that. And I'll fix that. But what it does is it gives you, kind of jogs your memory of what the process was. And kind of, especially the meeting 1 where I talk about the things that we talked about regarding active living assets and barriers was interesting to look back at. A lot of the meeting summaries are shorter because a lot of the work that was done will end up in the recommendations. So I didn't write out recommendations in the project goals and recommendations because we're still working on those today. But what I did do is I went through all the meeting notes and put in anything that was leading to a recommendation or sounded like a recommendation or a goal. And so you can see that part of those notes, I guess, kind of picked out things that where people actually said they wanted to do something. So you can look through those before we do our additional exercises for today. And it should jog your mind quite a bit as to what's been talked about in the past as far as outcomes and recommendations and products. And it's pretty interesting. And you might want to think about looking back at those things and including them in the recommendations in the end. So that got us to the point of the actual recommendation or action steps that are being developed, which start on page 13. Where you've got the different groups broken out. And then it also talks about the common goals and shared interests that were developed at the last meeting as well. First of all, I guess, is there anything else you'd want to see in a final document for this process? Any other segments, background, information, data? Everybody's pretty comfortable with it? Yes, Bruce.
Are you going to need a writing board and an easel? Should I request?
The ones that's sitting in my office right at home? Yeah.
I mean, they probably have one. Should I go request?
You know, I don't think we'll need it this time. I think we've got the sheets of papers and pens, and I think we'll lay it out on smaller paper and then just talk about it today.
Do you want an easel?
Sure, as long as you've got one right handy. Okay. Any discussion about the summary document itself? Easy crowd today. All right. Number 2 on the agenda, or 3 on the agenda, I guess, is we're adding additional details to action steps. So we are breaking into geographic areas. We have Grand Portage, Cook County, and Grand Marais represented. West End is not represented here today, so I'll have to get a hold of them separately. I guess Bruce can serve that. I'll work with Bruce on the west end. I'm pretty familiar with that area. So, the action steps, again, are on page.
Andy, everybody on their table, we just printed in the middle of your table, it's
Oh.
upside down. We printed out kind of like a version or a draft.
Okay.
Or printout. That's what you came up with last time.
All right. Perfect. So what I want people to do is take your agenda and turn it over, and then create a little table that says goal on the top. These will be columns. So goal, action step, responsible party, estimated cost, and the final one will be timeline. So what I want people to do is go back through the goals that were developed for their community or their area that you're looking at, and start making the graph. So take your goal, put it under the goal, put that responsible party you've already developed in there, and then also look at the estimated cost. The estimated cost, we don't need, obviously it's a very, very broad estimate, but basically you're saying expensive, middle, or cheap. Know what I'm saying? And it can be whatever you perceive those numbers to be. All right. And then what I want to do is play it out and add additional goals that you might want. If you think this is actually all the goals you want, just play it out. But then start talking as your group, really get into details of what those action steps are, how it's going to be done, really descriptively, how is it going to be done. I'm going to make this phone call, I'm going to do this, somebody's going to do that. How's that sound? All right. Questions? Okay.
Okay, agenda.
This is the plans from the last time we met. The goals that was in detail.
Everybody got one? Oh, sorry. So, get started on that, and then we'll take a break.
I think once we get through the workshop and kind of have a plan or an idea is what we're trying to accomplish, then I think we need to then go to our engineers, and I'm sure it's in cooperation with NDOT, but we'll have to work with our city engineer.
It's not very loud. Thank you. Hello. All right, so we're going to talk about what our goals and action steps are. We'll start with Grand Portage. And what I've done, I actually went through all the things that have been discussed, and I picked out some themes here. And we'll see if these goals and action steps address any of these themes. Okay? Go ahead.
Well, we work mostly on additions to what we already have.
Okay.
So we have the creation of a community park, and
That's the goal?
That's the goal.
Okay.
Action step is plan, build. The responsible party is the wellness committee. Estimated cost is kind of the high end, and timeline would be by summer 2015. Okay, second thing is to increase physical activity as a activity between youth and adults, and the action step is a Kichiani Gaming activity challenge, and the wellness committee is the responsible party. Estimated cost on the low end, and the timeline is starting 6/14 to September 14.
Okay.
Third thing is to improve pedestrian safety. The action step is installing speed signs in the school zone. Wellness Committee, construction, trust lands, and safety office. Middle of the road cost completed by July of 14. Fourth thing is wellness education. The action step is to hold a wellness fair, responsible parties, community center, wellness committee, and the clinic. Middle of the road cost, June of 14.
Say that one again, just the goal?
The goal was wellness education.
Okay.
Okay. Next thing would be to promote intergenerational physical activity. And the action step is to hold a community walk cleanup event. And the responsible parties will be the Elderly Nutrition Program and the Wellness Committee. Low cost, completed by August of 14. Okay, and the last thing is promoting physical activity and healthy eating. The action step is integrating gardening and physical activity into the youth summer program. Responsible parties are education, school, community center, and clinic staff. Middle of the road cost and timeline is June of 14 to August of 14.
Okay, that's a lot of things. Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Cook County. Are questions for Grand Portage at all about these ideas? All right. So you notice that a lot of their efforts fell more into this marketing and encouragement idea, which is good to see. Maybe there'll be some variety in the other ones. So we're covering things. Okay, go ahead, Cook County.
Okay, our goal is healthier staff. Our action, which we're already working on, which is timeline, is to get pedometers and give staff gifts for getting so many miles per month, so many steps. And the responsible party will be me and Allison, and we're on the safety committee. And we already have a Blue Cross grant of $1,200 to put towards this. Our other goal is to have one entity to review the needs of our trails. Our action is to create a task force, and it will be on the agenda in the next month. And the responsible party is the county board. At this time, there's no cost. We need to figure that out. And our goal is by the end of summer. And then our next is a checklist so that we do not miss opportunities in encouraging healthy lifestyle when our highway department needs to improve a road, add a road, replace a road. So they already have the checklist, but it's just internally reviewed. So we are gonna ask that checklist is reviewed with the county board, and that is no cost. And we hope to have that done with them in the fall.
All right. That's it?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any questions for Cook County? Yes.
So these pedometers are like on the job activity, not off the job?
We haven't clarified, we just discussed it this morning actually at the safety committee. We had the funds and we wanted to figure out what we could do to encourage healthier, and so we might let them do it all the time. We're just kind of brainstorming, and right now we're finding out how much they'll cost, how many we can get, and how we'll utilize them. And what the gifts would be, because obviously the gifts have to be healthy, but they have to be healthy things people actually want.
Is that what the grant is for, is those incentives?
The incentives and the pedometers.
Do you have an idea of the timeline of how long you want to run this program for?
We might do like a 30-day and then redo it, kind of like Moving Matters does a February and a May. We'll pick out different times to do it. And they can use their own pedometers or their iPhone apps too if they want, and just submit their.
Is it like an inter-department competition or something?
I thought about doing different departments compete against each other, but yeah. You know, we just kind of thought with the highway department, you know, they could hop out of their truck and walk around the truck one time and hop back in and get 10 steps. Or
I would just take it home and put it on my 7-year-old daughter. I mean, for sure.
Particularly if there's money involved.
All right, thank you. Graham Ray.
Well, our goal I'll start. Our goal is to reconstruct the Highway 61 corridor through Grand Marais. And the first action step would be, I would call it a pre-planning process that will be done by the steering committee of Mike, Maren, Kristen. I guess I just asked her. Dave.
Well, they already
and-
started.
They already
Hope they don't
started, so they're
mind.
already doing it. Maren, not Maren.
Okay.
And the estimated cost will be negligible. Timeline will be before the next couple of weeks. And then the next step, or the next action step, will be to do a workshop. And the people in charge of that will be the city, I think with MnDOT at that step, is that clear? And the estimated cost will be, well, the active living group has a budgeted amount of $30,000 to go toward that step. And that will be done with the consultant. And that timeline will be, starting June 30th, could go for 3-4 months. And then I'm not clear of, well, you can maybe take the next step, which would be the engineering step? Are we at the engineering step?
Design, conceptual.
Oh, design step, yep, let's do the design step first. I'm passing
Okay,
it.
so the design would involve, again, continuation of the public process to involve all the parties that, worked through the workshop and get them involved in kind of creating what it is the ultimate build-out might look like. That we have, again, funding from Moving Matters to use CJ Brandis. That would be part of this 3-month process. Might be finishing up in September. Kind of depends on how it kind of all comes together. Then beyond that, then it starts to get a little bit more difficult to kind of figure out exactly what the next part is. But the engineering portion of it is, what would happen after is the action step that would have to happen after the conceptual design. But engineering is tied to funding and funding sources. There are some opportunities out there which Brian has told us about, and we have to start to pursue those. So we really have to work closely with MnDOT on this. It's MnDOT road, but yet it's going to be a city project. MnDOT would be responsible for the road portion of it, but the city would be responsible for all the remaining portions, sidewalks, curb and gutter, any lighting, landscaping, and those are the kind of things we need to work on through the design and concept planning process.
The county could also be involved if it involves an intersection with a county road, correct? Okay.
The other piece I didn't state very clearly is that the goal is really Highway 61 through downtown becomes pedestrian scale and no longer a barrier to active uses, so that people feel encouraged to actively engage in the community by welcoming pedestrian-oriented design policies and places. Because actually the Highway 61 functions just fine as it is, but in order to encourage traffic across the street and make the whole downtown of Grand Marais more a part of the residential part of downtown and create the whole connection for pedestrians and more of a friendly atmosphere.
And the focus of the project, for the most part, is going to be in the downtown area, but we're not going to ignore the extensions east and west too, to recognize that it has to be tied into whatever we do downtown, and the aesthetics, the appearance, the visual effect of that has to be all joined together.
How do you define downtown from where to where?
We haven't defined that.
Okay.
We could make some stats.
Yes, you're
out
right.
of it.
That's a good question. So,
Yeah.
yes, we haven't defined.
And I don't think you have to define it until you get going with the focus.
Yeah, it's a design question, I think.
Mhm.
But can I ask a question?
You may not.
When does, When does your election takes place this fall also, and does the new council and mayor begin in January?
Yep.
So this project really will be with your existing council and mayor?
This portion of it, obviously.
This,
part-
right, this stage,
Yeah.
Your legacy.
Sweet.
Okay. So, we talked about the roadway improvement checklist. The county is looking at that, so when a roadway goes to be something have done to it, there'll be a checklist to check against, and that'll include public input opportunities and examinations of how active living could be a part of it. The good relationships were talked about by each group, with collaboration with the Cook County Trails Task Force being kind of the biggest collaborative effort, is my understanding, the most comprehensive. The question about the Trails Task Force, could it be Trails and Active Living Task Force? You want to keep it as a trail. You don't want to just say Active Living Task Force, because you're going to look at ATV and snowmobile as well.
Yes. We could say it, but it might prevent some people from being involved.
Okay.
Is that do you hope that's still an underlying theme though, would you say?
Yes. We can infiltrate the minds of those who do not believe.
No
comment.
I like that.
One thing that was talked about at previous meetings was a zoning or development checklist. So when a person goes to build something, particularly something large as a development, we had talked previously, it had just been mentioned by someone, I'm sure someone really smart, good looking, wearing a black shirt, and I guess it could speak to a lot of us. It's similar to the roadway improvement checklist, is when these bigger projects come up for development, checklist them against active living to see how they're doing, and then give them a grade or encourage ways that they could improve their checklist score or whatever you have. So that was discussed. Marketing encouragement, every group discussed that. Comprehensive plan, we have a countywide comprehensive plan ongoing right now, but this group also talked about wanting to do a comprehensive trails plan for the entire county, similar to what Lake County did. Highway 61 safety aesthetics, I changed it just to be highway safety and aesthetics, because Grand Portage has some things that they want to do in that area as well, that weren't on Highway 61. They were on a different roadway, correct?
Yes.
And then, of course, the Grand Marais project is well known. Nobody talked about sidewalks and trail snow removal.
We refuse to talk about snow this time of the year.
I think that's part of consideration of the Grand Marais downtown improvement, the Highway 61 improvement, the sidewalk trail, bike trail through town, how that's going to be managed. But when you start talking about a bigger project like that, those kind of details don't necessarily come out as the primary goal.
So maybe, I mean, what you're looking at in Grand Marais is, let's tackle this thing and see where we end up. And then we can talk about all the connections to it. Which kind of fits into the more sidewalks that came up in other meetings too. The other thing that came up was actually having active living coordinator position or some sort of function where somebody was paid to look at active living all the time.
I'd like to make it active living arts. Be broader.
Community character manager.
Exactly.
We could say community character management, but then everybody in this room could think that they were being managed personally.
I'm gonna say there's no character management.
Chris?
Can we go back to the trails, the county trails thing again? That idea. And I was wondering, Andy, what you were not saying when you asked about, could it be trails and active living?
Well, could the group also talk about where to put more sidewalks, not just trails? Or could that group tackle, snow removal from sidewalks? So I could you go into more detail. What you're talking about was a fairly small actual body
Commission or task force.
commission that was the Trails Commission, and I'm gonna project what I think it should look like now. But I know you talked about a lot of these things too. So you would have fairly high up representation from county commissioners, the city, the tribe, primarily just elected officials. And that group would be fed information. They would set up meetings with the snowmobile clubs. So that's how they would communicate. So instead of trying to make a giant trail committee that includes every mode or use, plus every jurisdiction, including the DNR and the Forest Service, and every geographic location, so you wouldn't want just a snowmobile person club from the east end, and there's another snowmobile club at the west end that would feel like they weren't represented. So that group would figure out how to get the information they need from those groups, whether it's an annual meeting with each of them or some, bring in presentations, what have you. But that group would have that coordinating force, and the staffing of that group would be responsible for kind of managing all that information. The other point being, we probably would form a bigger committee of everybody that wants to be involved to do the trails plan itself. So this commission would be ongoing. The trails task force, I would call it, is simply missions to get the plan done. And then it would be this group's mission to see that it's implemented, the commission. Is that clear? So you would have geographic representation on the group and jurisdictional representation, but it would not be modal representation on the smaller group.
So are you saying that like sidewalks or pedestrian connectivity within, say for example, Grand Portage or Grand Marais, that could fall under?
It could, if you want to leave here and take the sidewalk to get to a trail, we need to know that those all connect. If there's a rest stop where you park, how do you get to the trails or the walking areas? We need to find out that all of these groups can connect and the trails meet each other and everyone's working together. And each one of these groups are often seeking funding to work on their section without knowing what the other ones are doing. And we could collaborate and work together.
And the commission would really be focused on getting funding. The plan would identify these missing connections, and the commission would say, okay, how are we going to fund that sucker?
But, when I think of the West End, you think of the, the cross-country trail group, the Superior Hiking Trail, snowmobile, trail. They know exactly, what other groups are, doing, where the trails are located. And they don't want them, connected. They want to be separate.
Right.
Which we can identify also, and mark and.
Yeah,
If
they want
you're a
their
ski-
separate uses.
Yeah.
Definitely. We're not saying combining uses.
No.
We're not saying connecting snowmobile trails to ski trails.
No.
We're saying connecting snowmobile trails to other snowmobile trails.
Right, you're on
Or
the
to
ski
businesses.
trail because you don't have a way to get
Yeah.
to the
Right,
other.
right.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know what benefit there would be to keeping those separate outside of just having boundaries where your responsibility to maintain those trails.
And the idea is too, is when the ski trail and the snowmobile trail are butting heads, maybe this commission can step in and say, hey, everybody, let's talk about this and figure it out.
Brilliant.
Is there an underlying assumption that the purpose is to provide recreational opportunities? Or are trails for more than that as well?
In my opinion, the commission would be looking at transportation routes as well. Which would
And what's
allow-
your all opinion?
Which, in my thinking of, if it is transportation routes as well, then that sidewalks can definitely be a part of it, so.
I think, existing trails are pretty much recreation oriented. They're not designed for transportation per se to get you from one place to the next.
Not in a straight line.
Well, unless you're thinking about, I want to go from Grand Marais up to
Right.
Devil Track to,
But
on
what people,
my snowmobile, you
Yeah.
think that but it's still more recreation, I think, than connectivity.
It's also
there's
a
an
safety
overlap,
issue.
sorry, I'm just gonna say this one thing. There's also an overlap between recreation and transportation in the fact
Right,
that
yeah.
if I'm staying in a hotel in downtown Grand Marais, I'd sure like to drive my snowmobile right from the parking lot to the trail I want to ride, rather than trailer to a parking lot somewhere else, untrailer the snow machine, and jump on the trail. And you could say that for hiking, biking, anything. Is that's one thing that the connections we would look at is where are destinations, where are people at, and how can we connect them to existing facilities
Without,
by doing that same
Yeah.
activity.
yeah,
So you're basically, it's transportation to the recreation.
yeah.
That's how I feel it.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So it flows.
It's safety too. I mean, when there's no connectivity for, let's say, snowmobilers, we've lost some out there and law enforcement doesn't know where to find them because we haven't identified where they're, we haven't identified a trailer where they're at. We've had half a dozen instances just in my district last winter. And if we have those and we all work together and let's say a skier's out and he bumps into a snowmobiler and they each know
Bumps in.
where to send him to, Because we get skiers and hikers in the winter that get on a wrong trail and they don't know it. It's a marked trail. So
Yeah.
we need to work together. We need to
Yeah, just a
collaborate.
map.
Mhm.
Heidi, what did you mean when you said that something about, I'm paraphrasing and probably not gonna get this quite right, but when you said like we'll infiltrate their minds or whatever.
That was a
I think,
direct
do you have any
quote. That was a
steps for
direct
that?
quote.
Did I get that about right?
Yes, infiltrate minds,
What are the
that's
action
correct.
steps?
Can you clarify what you meant by that?
When we
Or were you
have
just
people on
completely
committees,
joking?
no, I'm not joking. When we have people on these committees, we have all of these people in this room working together, and you come up across someone who doesn't understand what active living means, doesn't understand what we're trying to do or what we mean, and they think we're trying to take a right away or we're trying to stop them from something. Having us with the knowledge and understanding of what this is can teach and educate those people so that they can see we're not the big green monster and we're not trying to take anything away from them. We want to make things better, make their options better. And I'm not going to force anybody to go walk or hike or bike, but if they want to, I want to give them the choices and the options to do that without being restricted.
And everybody that's attended one of these meetings has more of a concept of active living in their mind, whether they like it or not. And when things come up, I mean, you're going to be better prepared to discuss it than you were in December.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to do is collect those sheets. If somebody has a clear sheet of those goals and action steps.
Oh, good.
And I'll document them. They'll be added to the document.
That's right.
And I'll send it out to everybody, and you can tell me if I got it right or not. I also plan to write up a recommendation for a zoning and development checklist.
An actual checklist?
I'm not going to write up the actual checklist.
Why
Sorry.
not?
You'll have to pay me for that at this point. And then you can decide if you want to keep it in there or toss it or change it or whatever. So my thought is I will provide this via email to everybody or through Maren or Christina. Yeah. Okay. And then I think from this point on, what this group does, the Sawtooth Mountain Clinic folks can kind of determine if they want to meet. If you guys want to meet again to discuss recommendations, feel free. And I'll make the changes. Otherwise, we'll get going on these things, and I'll send everybody subtle reminders once a day. So.